What's cooking, everybody? Dave Mays here with Kinotika, and today I'm unveiling a new series for this channel. It is called the Final Cut Pro X Speed Editing Tips and Tricks, and this is going to be episode number 1. I've had over a decade of experience as a professional editor, and I've been using Final Cut Pro X in particular since the day it was released back in 2011. The majority of my career as a filmmaker before I started YouTube was shooting wedding films for my friend Jeffrey Holland at Full Frame Cinema, and I did a lot of speed editing when I was doing weddings. A lot of you guys may have heard of same-day edits. Well, that was basically back when we were shooting weddings. We would shoot the whole wedding, we would edit the whole thing during the ceremony and the reception, then we would show it after everybody was done eating their dinner at the wedding itself. And it was something that I loved being a part of and I loved doing. When I moved on into my career as a freelancer, I also did highlight videos for corporate events where I would come out and film the entire event all day long. Dave Ramsey, for example, was one of my clients, and overnight I would edit a full short film that I would put together that we would show in the morning. The power of showing footage that you shot literally the day before and then having a fully edited, beautiful cinematic piece for the client is so powerful, and I think there is a lot of value in speed editing and speed creating in general. Now for a quick ad break before we get to the tutorial. This video is brought to you by Storyblocks, the best place to go to get your unlimited amount of B-roll footage. Often when you're editing, you find yourself at a loss for what to put in place of boring A-roll. This is where Storyblocks comes in. With Storyblocks, you have access to thousands of video clips for an affordable subscription fee. You're not having to pay for each individual B-roll shot. You're literally paying, just like Netflix, for a subscription to literally an unlimited amount of stock footage from their site. Many of these clips come in a high-resolution 4K file in ProRes, Motion JPEG, or MP4. Let's say you're talking about a gamer boy, for example, and you're doing a whole video about gamers. You could literally just go on Storyblocks and search boy playing games, and boom, there you go. Everything you need to get plugging away. You just click the quick download link and away you go. If you're at a loss with your B-roll footage, then definitely check out Storyblocks by clicking the first link in the description below. When you click that link, you're helping support this channel financially, and we really appreciate it if you were to click that link and check out Storyblocks. I personally use Storyblocks all the time with Kinotika, and I know you will enjoy using it as well if you aren't already. So without any further ado, let's get into the very first course in this series. I'm going to be giving you 3 tips and tricks on how to be a speed editor, and these are things that I do in my workflow. Now we're going to be using footage that I shot for CES in 2020 this year. I didn't use any of this footage because I ended up scrapping the whole video idea, but it doesn't matter. It's just for demonstration purposes only. We're going to get started fresh with a brand new library in Final Cut Pro X. Now, Final Cut Pro X uses the term library for projects, if you will. That's usually what things are called back in the old days. So I'm going to create a new library in the CES folder that I have here and call it the Speed Editor 1. Now, the way that I like to work inside of Final Cut Pro X is not to import the footage into the library itself. When you do that, what happens is all the footage is brought into the library, and it makes the library huge. It makes it like several gigabytes, and it's a nice clean way to work if you're only doing everything in Final Cut one time, that's it. But I personally like to have everything in folders in Finder rather than having it all inside the Final Cut Pro X library. So what I'm doing here is I'm selecting each day that I have all this footage here, it's just these MP4 files, and you want to make sure that your files are checked at leave files in place. When you have copy to library set up, that means everything is going to go to the library. You're going to basically make duplicates of everything, and it's going to get all messy. Basically, I have everything on my desktop already, so if I copy it to the library, it's going to just duplicate all those files, and it's going to be a big headache. Often when you are editing remotely, maybe you have a hard drive that you're using for backups and things like that, you could copy to library and have your library stored on your desktop, and then that way you kind of have a backup of everything on a hard drive somewhere else. But I personally like to basically use my own folder structure built into Finder on that hard drive, or in this case on my desktop, and I leave files in place. So I'm going to import all that, and as you can see, I've now brought in all the footage from CES here. And to show you guys what I'm talking about the small library size, you can see the Speed Editor 1 is literally only 23 megabytes. It might not get any larger than that as I edit. Now there's also another way to make everything a lot speedier while you're editing, and that is to go into your preferences, go to playback and make sure that background rendering is turned off. Now, this is a really handy feature. It's a great thing to have if you want to see things fully rendered out, like your graphics and your color corrections. But honestly, if you have a good enough computer, you can pretty much still see what everything looks like with background render turned off. It just lowers the load on your machine as you're editing, and it's not constantly processing things when you hit pause and play and all that type of stuff. So turn that off. I always have that turned off personally. All right, now I'm going to bring in the audio files that I recorded. I'm going to select these two folders. One is the H1N and the other is an iPhone recording. And since these are already in a nice folder, I'm actually going to check keyword from folder button and check this out. What it does is it creates what's called a keyword, which basically is like a folder. Basically, it creates these two keywords that you can see, H1N and iPhone, and that is basically just a little folder that holds those items. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make another keyword and just call it video. Put all the footage that I recorded in there. That way we can separate everything up, and if we just want to look at the video. What's cool about this is you can have multiple keywords that use the same footage, basically. So I'm going to make another keyword collection and call it my A-roll. So A-roll would be anything of me talking to camera. Some A-roll of me talking to this guy from Insta360. I'm gonna put that in the A-roll folder, just drag and drop it. Now to step 2, sync your A-roll to your audio if you have a separate audio source. So the way that you do that in Final Cut is super easy. Basically, I dragged my H1N file into the A-roll file or the keyword collection here. And I'm gonna select the clip that I wanna sync to my audio. These two shots are very similar to this one, but as you can see, this is just me rambling with him. I think Jake was just figuring out the shot. This is the main shot here. So I'm gonna select the main shot, the main A-roll shot, and then select my audio from the H1N by hitting Command and selecting both, and then I can right click that, hit synchronize clips, and just leave everything as default. It works magically in the background, and boom, it's done. Now it does dump that synced clip into your event instead of the keyword collection that you're using, so I like to drag it back into the keyword collection that I'm using. That way everything's nice and organized. And now I can bring that clip down into the project. Now I have a project that's already set up. It's called the Insta360 and the settings are just set to the default settings that I had on the camera. I think it's 1080p, 24 frames per second. And as you can see here, Insta360, I've seen all sorts of cool things. The audio is nice and synced up, right? So once everything's synced up, I bring it down into the project. I can move on to step 3, which is a lot of fun. This is the A-roll edit. This is where a lot of the creative editing comes in. I like to think of my B-roll and music as completely secondary. The A-roll, this main foundation here, is the meat of this video. I'm gonna show you how I do it super duper fast, and you're gonna see how I use the magnetic timeline to my advantage. To show you some of the magic of Final Cut Pro X, you got to make sure that you have this one feature enabled. As you can see on my main synced clip here, there's an orange line underneath. If you're not familiar with that orange line, it's actually one of the most useful features of Final Cut in my opinion. It's called the Used Media Range tool. So you want to go to View, Browser, and then Used Media Ranges. Turn that on, and you'll see underneath your synced clip there an orange line. Now it's like, okay, cool, that's a big orange line. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. Well, check this out. I'll zoom in a little bit on the clip so you can see a little bit more of it. And what's great about Final Cut is you can really clean up your work desk here. See, I'm gonna turn off the side viewer and everything. It's just nice and clean. I have my timeline down here, my viewer, and then my big window here. It's nice and clean. I love that about Final Cut. But you see all this black space here on the left? That's all the audio that I was rolling before Jake even hit record on the video. So I'm going to just trim all that off here by hitting the blade tool. I hit the letter B on my keyboard, and then I hit the letter A, and that goes back to my select tool. I'm going to select that and just hit delete, and boom. Did you see how that updated there? Watch, I'll undo it. See the orange right there? You can see that's being used right now in the project that I have set up. As soon as I delete that clip, it updates in the viewer here on the left. It tells you, hey, all this area here that is not orange, we're not using that. The only part that we're using is the orange part. This comes in a lot of handy, especially when you're doing B-roll editing, and I'll show you how powerful the used media range feature is in the future. I use that all the time, but if you're not familiar with it, definitely turn that on. One of my favorite features. So let's go ahead and get started with my A-roll edit. All right, so I'm here with Michael to talk about the new Insta360. What's it called?
1R.
So I mean, what's cooking, everybody? Dave Mays.
Okay, so I already messed up this whole thing. You're gonna really see my mistakes when you see how I edit. So I'm gonna go ahead and just trim that up. All right, I'm just deleting it. And as you can see, the magnetic timeline is just working to our advantage. I don't have to do anything. I just hit delete.
What's cooking, everybody? Dave Mays here with Insta360.
Okay, so what you want to do is make sure that your viewer is set to best performance, and then this is where the speed kicks in. JKL on your keyboard is how you hit pause, play, and then fast forward, reverse, all that kind of stuff. So this is where my fingers live. JKL, JKL, all day long, JKL. And then my other fingers are resting over the B and A tool. B is blade, A is your selection tool. I'm constantly going back and forth between JKL, B, and A, and it's a really fast process. It's something that I've developed, over years of doing this, but I'm just gonna go in real time here. I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to edit right now, okay? And I want to show you how fast this can be.
What's cooking, everybody? Dave Mays here with Insta360. We're here to talk about the new 1R from Insta360. I've seen all sorts of cool things on social media about this. Looks like a cube or a dice or something crazy. Super modular. Tell me all about this incredible new camera.
Oh man, we're so excited about this. This is the world's first modular action camera. So the real great part about it is you not only do you have the ability
All right, so you kind of stumbled on his words
modular
there.
action camera. So the real great part about it is
All right, so I'm just
camera. The real great part about it is
I'm just selecting things B, trimming it, and then A, selecting it, delete.
action camera. The real great part about it is you not only do you have the ability to shoot 5.7K 360. You not only
So see how he's kind of stumbling his words there? I'm just looking at the waveforms.
is not only do you have the
I'm just looking at the waveforms, and I'm just trimming away those mistakes that he's
it
making.
is not only do you have the ability to shoot 5.7K 360 video, but you can also take this apart, pull apart the cubes,
All right, so there's a gap there. I'm just going to delete that.
pull apart the cubes, and you can have 3 different modular lens add.
All right, so there's a huge moment there. Now, as you can see, I hit B, and I kind of trimmed a little too close here to the waveform. You can see how the waveform's still going. So what I like to do is I hit the letter T, and that allows me to trim the clip, and I can actually slip it down like so.
And you can have
The waveforms are really what I'm mostly looking at. In fact, I can even change the viewer to be only waveforms, which is actually really handy because my shot isn't really changing. It's just a two shot like this, and it never really changes. So I might as well just use the waveform viewer. So you can do that again by going over here and selecting the waveform viewer.
and you have 3 different modular lens add-ons. So you have a fixed angle modular lens add-on. So you have a fixed.
All right, so I'm just going to trim it here.
So you have a fixed the cubes. So you have a fixed angle.
All right, so notice
Cubes.
I'm gonna change it back to just kind of the standard viewer here.
So you have a.
So notice how I cut that. I don't want all that fluff that he put in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the audio sound a little bit better between these two cuts. So right now it's a little hard.
Cubes. So you have a fixed angle.
You hear that little clip there? So the way that you fix that is I like to trim a little chunk of that waveform right there by hitting B again. I'm going to select the clip, right click it, hit detach audio. And what it does is it brings that audio out of that clip. And what you can do is actually slip it over slightly. And what's so great about Final Cut is you got these little sliders on the side here. It's so easy to quickly crossfade. So all I gotta do is just add a quick little crossfade like that.
Cubes. So you have a fixed.
And now there's no clipping on those two cuts.
Cubes. So you have a fixed angle, 16.5 millimeter 4K. 16.5 millimeter 4K 60 lens that just shoots regular wide angle. You have for the first time in an action camera, you have a 1-inch sensor and this is monumental for us because with this lens you're able to capture amazing low light footage. You are co-engineered by Leica. With this lens you're able to capture amazing low light footage. You're able to get higher resolution content, 5.3K fixed.
So I'm just listening to what he's saying. I'm looking at the waveforms, you know, I'm waiting for him to kind of catch himself. You know, he's obviously improvising all this, so he didn't know what exactly he was going to say, so he's kind of stumbling around a little bit. Of course, no pressure to this guy. He's doing a great job. But I'm just looking at the waveform and just waiting for him to make his point. And I just remember, you know, as I'm looking at those waveforms, where those cuts are going to be. I'm constantly hitting JKL, JKL. Sometimes I'm doing double speed, sometimes not. I'm hitting B and A constantly and then delete whenever I'm deleting those clips. And it's so great with Final Cut because of that magnetic timeline. You're able to just, as you can see here, select a clip and hit delete, and it just, boom, just ripple deletes instantly. You can do this with other programs now. It's a lot easier with Premiere. There's hotkeys you can use, but I do love how quick and easy it is to just slip things around on the timeline.
Footage, get higher resolution content, 5.3K fixed video, and it fits in your pocket. It's incredible. You know, it fits in your pocket. And it fits in your pocket. It's incredible. Fixed video, and it fits in your pocket. It's incredible.
You know, the 1-inch variant, I think, is what most people on my channel are going to be most excited about, because we got a lot of filmmakers that watch our channel.
Yes, we do. Hi, filmmakers.
And I have been wanting GoPro DJI somebody to do. And I have been wanting GoPro DJI somebody to do a bigger sensor, and that's been one thing that nobody has ever done. Like, you got all this great stabilization now, but still, action cameras are terrible in low light. So exists from Sony, but it's not really a true action camera. And this is kind of the first, I mean, like I said, this is the first one. The cool thing that I love about this is the fact that if you...
So again, I'm just kind of clearing up any gaps, if there's any long pauses, ums, or whatever.
The cool thing that I love about this is the fact that if you are a self-shooter, maybe you're a YouTuber or something like that, you can flip the screen around and film yourself. But there's no caveat to it, because when you're done shooting yourself, you just flip it back around the other way. So really ingenious development. I'm assuming that the screen ingenious development. I'm assuming that genius development.
So again, I'm gonna slip that audio a little bit here. And what's cool about Final Cut again is I can actually manipulate the clip like this. It drags everything behind it with it as I'm slipping this clip back and forth. It's so handy. And you see this all the time with Marquez Brownlee. You know he edits in Final Cut Pro X. Sometimes you'll actually hear the audio he's speaking. At the end of a clip, you can hear it coming, but you don't see it yet. This is a very popular technique because our brains actually comprehend the audio before we comprehend the visual. So often, if you want to have a cut between one shot to the next, you actually want your audio to come in a little bit earlier before the video actually comes in. It's just something weird with our brains. And so often when I am slipping an audio from one cut to another, I will actually extend the audio over a bit and have the video from the previous clip kind of on top of where the audio is going to land next.
Development. I'm assuming that the screen module also has maybe some processing or something. Is that necessary to... You have to have something attached to something to use it, obviously, right?
Yeah, so
Obviously, right?
Yeah, so yes.
Okay, so that's good enough for our demonstration. I'm going to delete the rest of the clip. You know, it's again, this is very basic. You want to obviously go through your entire A-roll, but as you can see over here on the viewer, you can actually see where the used media range thing is coming into play. So you can see the orange lines where I made those cuts, and every little gap there is actually, you know, the shot that I'm not using. What's so great about that is if I am maybe missing something and I'm like, where's that thing? I don't see it in the timeline. I can just visually see up here in the used medium range area, you know, those sections that I didn't use. Maybe I forgot something that I didn't include in the edit. It's wonderful to have that feature. I love the used media range feature. That's basically it for the A-roll for the most part. I'll, you know, just show you quickly how I do my funny little cuts with the zooms and stuff.
I'm assuming that the screen module also has maybe some processing or something. Is that necessary?
So like right there, I would do a zoom. So I'm gonna select that clip, go over to my inspector tab. And it's a very manual process. You can use trackers and stuff, but all I do is just zoom in like crazy on it. Keep the rule of thirds in mind as I'm doing it. Obviously, the resolution is not high enough to make that look good, but
processing or something, is that necessary?
So as I'm talking, I like to cut over to the other person to get their honest reaction to me as I'm still speaking.
Is that necessary to... You have to have...
necessary to you have to have. So again, I use the T button. That's the trim tool or the slip tool. You can slip that over. So as you can see, I have this close up here and then this one. Something is that necessary to you have to have something attached. So as I'm talking, I'm going to copy the effects from here by hitting Command C. And then this is a crazy hotkey, but here you go. Shift Command V, all those things at once. I now have the paste attributes window open. I can select all the transform tools, which are the zoom and scale and position attributes. I hit place or paste, and now that has the same attributes as this one. Processing or something, is that necessary to you have to have something attached to something to use it, obviously, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's how I do some of my goofy little edits. So that about does it for this episode of the editing tutorial with Final Cut Pro X. What do you guys think of this video? Let me know in the comment section below and give me some ideas on what you want to see more of with a tutorial like this. I'll make a whole nother video talking about how I edit my B-roll, which you're definitely going to want to subscribe to watch, because that is really my secret sauce, is having fun with the B-roll. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, I'm Dave Mays. Follow me on Twitter at Dave Mays, and yeah, we'll see you next time.